Hello, this is Michael Moss. Heather Cox Richardson is unable to read the letter today, so I will be reading it in her place. April 23rd, 2026. Yesterday, Secretary of the Navy John Failen spent the day talking to lawmakers about the Navy's plans for new ships and about the Pentagon's huge budget request, only to get a call from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth asking him to resign. Phelan is a billionaire businessman who had no previous military experience, but who raised millions of dollars for Trump's 2024 presidential campaign. Haley Britsky, Zachary Cohen, Kristen Holmes, Natasha Bertrand, and Caitlin Collins of CNN report that Phelan's close relationship with President Donald J. Trump has irked Hegseth, who saw Phelan's direct communications with the president as an attempt to go around him. And Deputy Defense Secretary Stephen Feinberg, a close ally of Hegseth's, wanted to take over shipbuilding and Navy acquisitions, jobs that normally fall to the Secretary of the Navy. As the title of an article by Drew Fitzgerald, Lara Seligman, and Marcus Weisberger of the Wall Street Journal noted earlier this month, Feinberg is a billionaire thanks to his career in equity and is now mounting his biggest takeover yet, the Pentagon. Feinberg is pushing Congress to pass the $1.5 trillion military budget Trump wants, while at the same time overseeing the newly created Economic Defense Unit, or EDU, in the Defense Department. The EDU is directing government investment in private sector defense contractors and has cut deals for the government to start taking equity stakes in those businesses. Greg Jaffe and Helene Cooper of the New York Times reported that Trump has been frustrated by Phelan's inability to fulfill his demand for the first of his new battleships by 2028, an inability caused by the fact that the U.S. shipbuilding industry doesn't have the capacity to do it. At a Wednesday meeting with Trump, Hegseth and Feinberg convinced the president that Phelan had to go. According to the CNN reporters, Trump told Hegseth to take care of it, prompting his phone call to ask for Phelan's resignation. But Phelan didn't believe Trump knew of the request, so he called officials at the White House to ask if they'd heard that he'd been asked to resign, and whether Trump knew. At about 5:30, Pentagon spokesperson Sean Parnell posted on social media that Secretary of the Navy John C. Failen is departing the administration, effective immediately. Still unconvinced, Phelan finally went to the White House to meet with Trump, who did not see him, but later confirmed in a phone call that Phelan was out. On social media yesterday, Trump posted two different New York Times pieces about the 2004 ratings for the television reality show The Apprentice, in which he starred as a business executive whose famous line was, "You're fired." Today, on social media, Trump's account posted, "John Failen is a longtime friend and very successful businessman who did an outstanding job serving as my Secretary of the Navy for the last year. I very much appreciate the job that he has done and would certainly like to have him back within the Trump administration sometime in the future." Lara Seligman, Josh Dawsey, Alexander Ward, and Natalie Andrews of the Wall Street Journal noted today that Trump sided with Hegseth over Phelan, who was his friend and neighbor and raised millions of dollars for him. Phelan's firing shows that Trump still supports Hegseth despite his missteps and high-level firings as Hegseth seeks to remake the Pentagon. Don Lamothe, Tara Kopp, and Noah Robertson of the Washington Post note that Hegseth has purged the military of its most senior ranks, including the top generals and admirals of every branch of service except for the Marine Corps and Space Force, several military lawyers, and even the head of the Army's Chaplain Corps. Today, the Pentagon cracked down on the independence of Stars and Stripes, the newspaper charged with providing independent news and information to the U.S. military community. Stars and Stripes operates out of the Department of Defense. In order to make sure the paper protects freedom of the press and remains independent of the Pentagon rather than becoming a propaganda outlet, Congress provided for it to be overseen by an ombudsman who regularly reports to Congress. Today, the current ombudsman, Jacqueline Smith, reported that she has been fired. Smith has publicly criticized Hegseth's crackdown on press freedom and noted in a farewell column today that no one should be surprised that they're kicking out the one person charged by Congress with protecting Stars and Stripes editorial independence. For nearly a year, Pentagon leadership has placed more and more restrictions on the mainstream media. She said she knew there would be perils for speaking out against Pentagon attempts to control the news, and urged Americans not to let Stars and Stripes be controlled by Pentagon brass. While Hegseth is shaping the military to his own specifications, and Feinberg is working to tie the government and an expanded military more tightly together, Republicans in Congress are trying to strengthen the power of the president over the American people for the next 3 years. As Charles Teifer of Talking Points Memo reported today, Senate Majority Leader John Thune, a Republican of South Dakota, has proposed funding Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, and Customs and Border Protection, or CBP, the parent agency for Border Patrol, through budget reconciliation, a process that cannot be filibustered in the Senate. Because Republicans control both the House and the Senate, this means things tucked into a budget reconciliation measure can pass without any Democratic votes. Senate Democrats refused to fund ICE and CBP for 2026 until Republicans agreed to reform the rules for the agents' behavior, including requiring them to get a warrant from a judge before breaking into someone's home, as courts have always required before this administration, and to take off their masks. But Republicans have refused to agree to those reforms and are turning to funding through budget reconciliation so they don't have to negotiate. And rather than funding ICE and CBP for the year, as the rest of the appropriations bills do, Thune is proposing to fund them for the next 3 years, taking away Congress's power to reform ICE and CBP by withholding funds not just for 2026, but for 2027 and for 2028. Even if Democrats take control of the House or Senate after 2026, they could not reform ICE or CBP, which would remain a growing force under the president's control. Today, Thune also teed up a vote on a bill to extend Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act of 1978 for 3 years, until April 2029. Both Democrats and Republicans are concerned that the system for collecting information on foreigners who appear to pose a threat to the U.S. can also sweep in U.S. citizens, enabling the government to surveil citizens without a judicial warrant. They want to make sure there are stronger guardrails in place to keep the government within constitutional limits. The House has been trying to hammer out a measure with cosmetic reforms, but if it fails, Thune will try to pass a 3-year extension of Section 702 with no reforms, taking away from Congress the ability to limit problematic government surveillance. But the tide for defending democratic values continues to rise. On Tuesday, more than 100 former NASA astronauts announced they were launching Astronauts for America, a nonpartisan organization to protect American democracy. In an open letter introducing their organization, they noted that as astronauts, they have sworn to defend the Constitution of the United States and continued, "We are committed to science, evidence-based decision-making, public service, and the rule of law." They vowed to speak out for American values and to work with lawmakers to protect those values. The rule of law, constructive checks and balances, equal opportunity, and the peaceful transfer of power. They reminded people that a strong democracy makes all else possible, economic growth, national security, and our rights and freedoms. I think we've all been getting concerned for quite a number of years about not being comfortable with the way some things are going. Astronauts for America co-founder and former astronaut Linda Godwin told Adam Kovac of Scientific American, "It was powerful to find out that a lot of us felt the same way, and there's a stronger voice together." Letters from an American was written by Heather Cox Richardson. It was produced at Soundscape Productions, Dedham, Massachusetts. Recorded with music composed by Michael Moss.